Hey guys, Colton here. We'll get back to the podcast in just 1 minute. I just wanted to let you know that my new book, 24 Rules of Masculinity, is officially out. If you've been resonating with the topics we've hit on in this podcast, discipline, purpose, identity, what it means to be a man today, this book was built for you. It's a straight-talking guide packed with hard lessons, biblical principles, and the kind of clarity that I think a lot of us are starving for. So whether you're just starting on your journey or looking to get back on track, I wrote this to be something that you can pick up, apply, and carry with you. You can find the 24 Rules of Masculinity on Amazon and through the link in the description. I would love to hear what you guys think. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back to Chasing Masculinity. Today, we're talking about a subject that sits at the foundation of who we become as men, fatherhood, and specifically what happens when it's missing. Right now, we're living in the most fatherless generation in American history. Not figuratively, but quite literally. More boys now are being raised without a father in the home than with one. And when a father disappears, something doesn't just go missing, something rearranges. The structure of the home changes. The moral formation of a boy changes. The trajectory of manhood shifts. But here is what I want to emphasize. When a father isn't present, that doesn't just mean the need for a father goes away. That instinct doesn't necessarily vanish. A young man will always look for someone to teach him how to become one. And if it can't be in his own home or at his church or in his community, he's going to go somewhere else. And that is where we see the rise of what I call digital father models. These are internet personalities or influencers, podcasters, ideologies that young men can cling to in the absence of real grounded flesh and blood masculine leadership. Now, some of these men offer real wisdom, but some of them just offer pure delusion. But all of them have this one thing in common. They've stepped into a void that should have been filled initially by fathers. Now, this episode isn't about praising or condemning any one figure, but it is about recognizing the conditions that created this dependency in the first place. Because the rise of digital fatherhood is not a cultural trend, it is a symptom, it is a signal, a warning sign. We are witnessing what happens when the responsibility of raising men is outsourced to media or to ideology or to an algorithm. And the young men that are listening to this, whether you're a father or not, you need to understand the solution to fatherlessness is not to cling to screens. It is to become the kind of man who can one day father well with presence and conviction and steadiness. So that is where we're going to go today. So with that, let's get into it. All right, let's start by framing the problem, and that is the vacuum of fatherhood. Fatherlessness is not vague. It is quantifiable, and it is cultural. In the United States today, there is roughly 1 in 4 children being raised without a father in the home. But in some regions and some demographics, it's 1 in 2. It is half. Now, when I'm talking about fatherlessness, I am not talking about emotionally passive fathers or men who are present but they're spiritually weak, although that is very real and worth discussing separately. This episode is about the literal absence of fathers in the home. There are some causes behind this, such as divorce becoming culturally normalized and expected, honestly, as you get into marriage. There's also single motherhood that is being framed as this heroicism by culture when it's actually tragic. And then there's men who are just straight up abandoning their responsibility, often because this responsibility is just viewed as optional. Now, there is an important distinction to be made here. Yes, millennial fathers who are present are more physically engaged with daily parenting than any other previous generation. However, far fewer men are forming these stable marriages and households to begin with. So, here's the overall trend. There is higher involvement among the men who do stay, but fewer men are staying at all. This is creating that vacuum. When a boy grows up without a father, the need for a father does not just disappear. That need is biological, it is psychological and social and spiritual. And that is because when a father is absent, a replacement will be sought. Boys are naturally going to look for strength to model, for conviction to follow, for a blueprint of what a man even is. And if that father isn't present, the internet could be the thing to pick up that slack. Digital fatherhood didn't rise because online creators became strong. It rose because real fatherhood collapsed. This is not some sort of trend to celebrate. It is a sort of warning signal of a cultural breakdown. So let's talk about why fatherlessness rose to begin with and the cultural sequence that occurred. This did not happen randomly. It followed a recognizable progression. One, there was a war on masculinity. There are masculine attributes that culturally have been recast from strength to harm, or leadership to oppression, or ambition to a sort of patriarchy. And what is the result? Men became ashamed of being men. Masculinity is no longer developed, it's apologized for. The next factor is a decline in religion. That is, when God is removed, man loses his meaning. He loses his duty or his sense of identity. He loses any sort of transcendent purpose he might have had. Now, without that covenant, marriage becomes more of an emotional convenience, not some sort of sacred responsibility. And without that spiritual masculine archetype as God the Father, then men are going to lose the template of this sort of sacrificial hardship. It becomes so much easier to dip out when things get tough. That leads me to the third thing, which is divorce culture. Now, divorce has become a self-care decision, or a badge of independence, or even a pathway to freedom. Marriage has shifted from a covenant that you have to endure to a lifestyle that you can enjoy if you so choose. And that is teaching boys that a man will only stay until he's uncomfortable. Then he's going to leave. The fourth reason is there are passive and addicted men. Think of porn. That is stripping men of any sort of discipline, but also any sort of sexual authority. And there's video games. You're getting these rewards without any real effort. There is so much more digital escapism in the past 5 years where men are living in these simulated worlds instead of living in the real one. Men no longer need to initiate. Men only consume. And the last reason that I think this is happening is the state and school replacing the home. Schools and media have become the primary shapers of identity, of morality, of a worldview, of gender concepts. Fathers no longer form their children. Institutions do. So we didn't just lose our fathers. We outsourced fatherhood. And this is the result. Now let's talk about the rise of digital father figures. When this real fatherhood disappears, young men still need a sort of structure, a sense of discipline, direction, identity, something to have an example to be. So what do they turn to? They turn to podcasts, or influencers, or TikTok clips, or any sort of algorithm-fed ideology. There are 1,000,001 examples of men online now that are filling this void, where there is a name that they have for themselves, a trait that they possess, and the missing piece then that they are filling in a man's life. Think of Dr. Jordan Peterson. There's a lot of positives there. He has order and a sense of responsibility, and he can give men a sense of meaning and discipline. However, the weakness is he has intellectualized masculinity without any sort of personal relational grounding for most men. Then there's much worse figures like Andrew Tate. The positive is he does exude strength and confidence and a sort of self-determination. However, The weaknesses are that he lacks any sort of humility or rootedness to anything or any sort of moral constraint. There's even people like Joe Rogan. He is a curious individual, and that's a positive thing. He has this sort of physicality, and he's very open to inquiry. However, he doesn't really have a firm worldview. He has this relativism that replaces any sort of conviction. So the main thing I'm getting at with these is there is good to learn from each. However, there's also a danger in idolizing any of them. You can extract traits from strong men. That's encouraged. But you should never outsource this sort of fatherhood to the algorithm, because what happens is the algorithm, one, it doesn't know you. The algorithm certainly doesn't love you. And the algorithm does not have to raise you. All it has to do is hook you. It just needs to keep you coming back. That's not something that you can outsource such a crucial or such a developmentally integral part of development. The core warning behind all of this is that young men are not being disciplined, they're just being programmed. And that is why digital fatherhood can only ever be a substitute. There's a difference between guidance and formation. Real fatherhood is not a source of information. He is a shaper of character. What a real father provides is presence. He sees your behaviors, your tendencies, your strengths, and your insecurities. And then he also provides a knowledge of who you actually are. He knows the difference between when you're tired versus when you're quitting, or when you're struggling versus when you're just making excuses. He also provides correction. He disciplines not to control, but to form that sort of structure, or he applies that pressure in the exact spot where you know you need strengthening. A father also provides accountability because he is going to remember your commitments and then call you out on them. And a real father also provides some sort of modeled sacrifice. He lives by an example day in, day out. You witness this masculinity more than you are taught it. A digital father cannot provide these things. He cannot evaluate your character. He cannot see your laziness or deceit. All that has to come from some sort of self-evaluation. He cannot challenge your cowardice or your comfort. His advice can only ever be generic because he doesn't know your life. He cannot initiate you into manhood because this initiation requires a real responsibility that is given directly to you. The key distinction is that influencers can absolutely instruct and can absolutely put you on a path of betterment, especially when you're applying that self-evaluations. But fathers, they actually form. The result of being shaped by only digital fathers means that young men could become opinion heavy. That just means that they're fluent in masculine rhetoric. Or they only experience light. There's no actual real testing or hardship. Or they're just loud in theory, but only when there's no cost. Or just that they're weak in practice because nothing has actually been carried, only ever consumed. And that is how we get to where we're at, where we have men who talk about discipline but don't wake up early. Or men who talk about honor but then cave to temptation instantly. Or men who preach strength but then actually avoid that weight of responsibility in real life. Masculinity learned passively is masculinity that's just going to collapse under pressure. So, this is what young men must do. There's a warning. It is direct, and it is uncompromising. Stop searching for the man who will make you feel strong. Start becoming the man who is strong. These steps are not complicated. They're just very uncomfortable. The first is to discipline your appetites. Food, simple. That's what we think of when we think of appetites. Discipline your food and what your intake is. But you have other appetites and you have other intakes in your life as well, such as porn. That needs to be cut out completely. Please seek resources that will help cut that out of your life. There's also entertainment. You need to be very careful with what your appetite consists of when it comes to entertainment. And then comforts. These are also all appetites. If you cannot govern your own impulses, then you really shouldn't be governing a household. The next thing that we need to do to become strong is to cut that escapism. That means reducing the time spent living in a sort of simulated reality. These are games or digital distractions or endless scrolling. These only give the illusion of accomplishment. And I'm not saying you have to delete all social media and video games. There's absolutely a place for all of those in your life. It's just replacing that winning online with winning real battles in real life. Now, the next is to learn responsibility before authority. Authority is earned through demonstrating burden bearing, but you cannot lead others if you are not even leading yourself. Don't put the cart before the horse here. The fourth thing to become strong in this way is to build a skill before your opinion. That means a man should become competent before he ever becomes loud. It could quite literally mean mastering something real like a trade or a craft or a profession or any sort of discipline. Now, the last thing that you can do is to develop conviction before voice. So a man with a microphone and no spine is only destructive. You have to suffer for something before you should really be speaking about it. Now, men are not formed by consuming ideas. They are formed by carrying weight. All of this goes back to a sort of formation that you are shaped by some sort of father figure. And that happens through pressure, not just self-inspiration. That's why fathers and father figures are so important. Now, I just want to close this idea with a sort of return to fatherhood. The world does not need more influenced men. It just needs fathers, period. That is men who stay when it gets hard, who lead when direction is unclear, who build when resources are few, to protect even when the threat is unseen, to sacrifice what is easy for what is necessary, to endure when that comfort would be simpler. That is the role that digital culture cannot replace. The solution to fatherlessness is not more masculine content. It is men becoming fathers who are worth being followed. And that is not a cultural trend. It is a responsibility. And it does begin with each and every one of you, even if you are not or will not ever be a father. So as we wrap up, I just want to bring this into one more clear point. Fatherlessness didn't just create this sort of gap, it created a hunger. And the world rushed to feed that hunger through algorithms, through influencers, through personalities, through performance models of masculinity. But none of these men know who you are. None of them see you. None of them are responsible for you. Whereas a real father forms a man through that presence and correction and example and sacrifice. And if that was taken from you, if you grew up without that anchor, I want you to hear this. You are not doomed by what you didn't have, but you are responsible for what you become. You do not get to stay the boy searching for direction forever. At some point, you have to decide to become a man who gives direction. The world doesn't need more followers of masculine influencers, it just needs fathers. It needs men who stay, who build, who protect. Men who take responsibility for their homes, families, faith, and for the generations that are going to follow them. So stop looking for men to tell you who you are and start the work to become the man that you needed. Doesn't have to be perfect or loud or performative, just steady, present, rooted, responsible. Be the one who breaks that pattern. Be the one who stays. Be the one who builds something that lasts longer than himself. Because the solution to fatherlessness is not found on a screen. It is found in the men who are willing to become fathers in the fullest meaning of the word. So thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning into Chasing Masculinity. And I will see you in the next one.